Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, starting with Lamed Zayin Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Amongst the Trumas and Meiser's obligation is Meiser Sheni, which is separated in the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of the Shemitah cycle. Meiser Sheni is the produce that has to be brought to Yerushalayim and eaten in Yerushalayim. The Torah gives an opportunity if a person does not want to bring the crops, the produce to Yerushalayim because it's too cumbersome, he can be poide that produce onto a matbeya, bring the matbeya, the money to Yerushalayim, and buy food with it and eat in Yerushalayim. Is Meiser Sheni Mamon Gavoya, or is it personal Mamon? It's a machloikis in Masechet Kedushin. Rabbi Meir says it's Mamon Gavoya. The Chachamim argue and say it's personal Mamon. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Asi says the following: Isa shel Meiser Sheni, the dough that was made through Meiser Sheni, a person brought his chitim, for example, to Yerushalayim, and he wanted to make bread with it, so he then makes dough. L'divrei Rabbi Meir petur min hachalo. According to Rabbi Meir, it's poter min hachalo. L'divrei Chacham chayeves bechala. Each one l'shitosoi. Since Rabbi Meir says Meiser Sheni is mamon gavoya, it's potter from chala. Whereas the Chacham say it's personal mamon, it's chayiv in chala. Kaf lamed ches amud aleph. Matzos shel Meiser Sheni. Rav Asi goes on to say, if a person baked his matzos with the grain of Meiser Sheni, and now he's in Yerushalayim, can he use that matzos to fulfill his mitzvah of matzah on Leil HaSeder? The div Rabbi Meir ein adam yoytzei ba yidei chavosei ba Pesach. The divrei Chachamim yoytzei ba yidei chavosei ba Pesach. Here's a machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Again, Rabbi Meir says that you could, yes, fulfill the mitzvah of matzah with your Meiser Sheni grain, whereas the Chachamim say not. The Gemara will explain why this is excluded. Esroig, a third case that Rav Asi says, shel Meiser Sheni, L'div Rabbi Meir ein yoytzei b'yidei chavosei b'yomtiv. You cannot use it for your daled meaning. V'chacham oimrim yoytzei ba yidei chavosei b'yomtiv. So Rav Asi tells us there are 3 different situations when it comes to Meiser Sheni that he says there's a machlokes in Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir, in the case of Meiser Sheni that is brought to Yerushalayim and made into dough, it's poter min hachala, according to Rabbi Meir. According to the Chachamim, it's chayeves bechala. In the second scenario where a person bakes his matzos with such Meiser Sheni, Rav Asi says Rabbi Meir would hold that he could not be yoytzei yidei chavosei ba Pesach, whereas the Chachamim say you could. And in the third scenario, when it comes to esroig, according to Rabbi Meir, if you cannot use your Meiser Sheni esroig to fulfill your mitzvah of daled minim, and the Chachamim argue. Maski flo Rav Papa. Rav Papa challenges Rav Asi's statement, and he asks the following: Bishlama Isa. It's very well when it comes to the Isa that you said. There's a machlokes in Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim in regard to whether it's chayav v'sim chala or not. Dichsiv, it says arusay seichem, mishalochem, arusay seichem. Your dough, it has to be belonging to you. And there, according to Rabbi Meir, since it's mamon gavoya, potter from chala. But esrog nami, and esrog also, we could also say it's understood. Dichsiv, it says ulakachtem lochem, and you shall take, referring to the dalim minim, including the esrog, for you. Lochem, to teach me for you, mishelachem yeh, it has to belong to you. So again, if it's not going to be belonging to you, then, since it's mamon gavoya meiser sheni, then you cannot go ahead and use it for your dalim minim. So both of those scenarios are understood the filashita of Rabbi Meir. However, elamatza miksiv matzaschem, in regards to fulfilling the mitzvah of matzah with Meiser Sheni, where do we find that it has to be your matzah? The fact that it's Moan Gavoya, why would that preclude a person, according to Rabbi Meir, from being Yotzei Yidei Chavosai on Pesach? Omar Rove v'item Rav Yeimar bashlamyo. Osya lechem lechem. There's a gzeira shav of lechem, both by chala as well as by matzah. Ksiv hacha lechem oini. By matzah it's written lechem oini, poor man's bread. V'ksiv hasam, in regards to challah, it says, V'haya ba'achalchem milechem ha'aretz. In regards to eating it from the lechem ha'aretz, it calls it lechem. Ma lehalom mishalachem, as we just saw before, because ariso seichem. Just we said ariso seichem has to be yours, and not mamun gavoya. Therefore, you're potter from challah. So too, we'll carry that over to matzah and say, it also has to be yours. Afkan mishalachem. Says the Gemara, Lema Misayeya Le. Let us bring a support. It says, Isa shel meiser sheni. When you have dough from meiser sheni grain, Petura min challah. Div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says it's potter from challah. Ve'chacham omrim chayeves. So here we have l'chara a siyua. Ask the Gemara, Lema Misayeya. It's only let us say. Here it's explicit. Hainu hach is exactly what was said. That Rabbi Meir says that over here, when it comes to matzah, you're not yotzi de chavasoy, and the Chacham say that you are. In other words, not only in matzah. Here it says explicitly when it comes to Isa, we have a statement clearly stating, just as Rav Asi said, that the Rabbi Meir says you're potter from the chiyuv of challah because it's mammon gavoya, and the Chachamim say that you are chayevis in challah. So asking him, Hainu hach, that's the very same thing that Rav Asi said. So why is it just lema misayele? Why is it only a suggested support? It's more than that. It's muchrach. The Gemara says, Halchi ka'amar. Here, it's a statement in regards to challah, which is also because of the Gzer Shavet true when it comes to matzah. But where do we know esrog is also included? On that, we're saying, lema misayele, Halchi ka'amar. Lema the mifligi be'isa Bahanoch nami pligi. The same way that they're arguing in regards to Isa, which is explicitly over here, let us say they're also arguing in regards to Esrog. Or Dilma, Shiny Hasam. Or maybe there, in regards to Challah, it's different. Whereby, again, Matzah is learned out from Challah. Dichsiv, because it says by Challah, Arusoseichem, Arisoseichem. It says it twice. One pasuk after the next, it says Arusoseichem. Trei zimne, and therefore one time is teaching me that it has to be yours in the sense that it has to be yours and not something that is stolen. And also Arisosechem has to be yours and not mamun gavar, and therefore excludes meiser sheni. But esrog, when it just says ulakachtem lochem, and you shall take the dollar, meaning that is yours, shelachem. So maybe that only excludes from a gazlin or somebody who is someone from a gazlin. But how do I know that it comes to exclude Meiser Sheni? Since Meiser Sheni, indeed, you can go ahead and bring it and eat in Yerushalayim, maybe over here also. And therefore, how do I know that is also excluded? In other words, again, when it comes to the case of Esau, then I know it's excluding a gazlin, right, that which is stolen, or even that which was borrowed. But in Esrog of Meiser Sheni, maybe that is different. Since over there, when it comes to an Esrog Meiser Sheni, it only states it once, then you can bring it to Yerushalayim and therefore eat it. And therefore you can also go ahead and miyotze yidei chavoso with your Meiser Sheni Esrog. So it's only a leim mesayel, it's only let us suggest a support. Says the Gemara, boy, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish asks the following question. Mahu, what's the din? Sheyotza yadam yedei chavosoi bechala shel meiser sheni b'Yushalayim. Here we have a scenario where a kohen, can he go ahead and take the challah that was given to him from meiser sheni dough and be yotze his day chavosoi on Pesach or not? What happened? Here you have a Bar Yisrael comes with his meiser sheni grain to Yerushalayim, and he makes dough, and he separates that dough, and he gives that dough, the challah, to the kohen. And now that's challah of meiser sheni dough. Now we know that a kohen can fulfill his mitzvah matzah with meiser sheni, with challah. But the question is, here it's challah shel meiser sheni. So can he fulfill a mitzvah in that way? So Gemara explains the question. Aliba de Rabbi Yossi Hagalili. According to Rabbi Yossi Hagalili, who explained earlier that you can only eat Meiser Sheni b'simcha, and not be'aninus. Whereas when it comes to matzah, it's called lochem oini. It's even be'aninus. That certainly you cannot use your meiser sheni with. So therefore, it's not a question according to Rabbi Yossi Agili. Because hashda bechulin lo nofik b'chalosa miboy. In a regular scenario, Rabbi Yossi Agili says you cannot use it. So certainly when it comes to chala, ki di boy loch alibo de Rabbi Akiva. The question is according to Rabbi Akiva, who says you can fulfill your mitzvah of matzah with meiser sheni. Bechulin hu de nofik. Because Rabbi Akiva said, since you could go and eat, normally you can only eat in Yerushalayim, but if the Meiser Sheni becomes Tameh, then you can go ahead and be paide it and then eat anywhere. So therefore it has the fulfillment of Bechol Moshvoisechem, the requirement in Matzah that you can eat it everywhere. So according to Rabbi Akiva, you could eat Chulin, Meiser Sheni, with your Matzah. Aval chala di imitam yele leslo hetem b'moshavos u'lesreifa azla lenofik. But when it comes to chala, if it becomes tamei, then you have to burn it. So one side of the question is that, according to Rabbi Akiva, that you cannot fulfill your mitzvah of chala that comes from meiser sheni. Or dilma amrinon hoyil v'ilu loikara aleim shem. Or we'll say a svar of hoyil, since if you did not yet call the Meiser Sheni, the shame of Chala, didn't get the designation of Chala, if you did not yet do that, and therefore would have the heter, that you can go ahead and be poide it and eat it anywhere. Therefore you could eat the Meiser Sheni for your matzah, then hashtanami nofik, so too. Now when it's Chala, we will also allow you to then use it for your matzah. So that's the question of Reish Lakish. Do we say the svar of hoyil because it doesn't yet have its shame of chala, then it would be valid, so too it's valid, or no? Ike da amre, there are those that explain a different explanation, a different version of Reish Lakish's question. Chavadai lo tiboiloch. This vadai is not going to be a question. The vadai amin hoyil ki tiboiloch. If it's vadai, that is already not going to be the question. The question is if we say by hoyel, if you'll say a svara of since, that's the question. Here, if you have a situation where the meiser sheni was then nifde, one was poide the meiser sheni onto a matbeya, he brought the kesef to Yerushalayim to go ahead and buy food with it in Yerushalayim. So he's then in Yerushalayim buys the food, and the food that he's using to buy, that he bought with the Meiser Sheni money, that becomes tamei. On that, there's a machlekes tanoim, if that's something you can go ahead and poide or not. The Chacham said you could be poide, and therefore you can go ahead and eat it anywhere. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's something that doesn't have the strength of kedusha that you can go ahead and poide it a second time. Therefore, you have to bury that food in Yerushalayim. You can't go ahead and poide it, you can't eat it elsewhere. So says the Gemara, going back again, the indicate amri, ho devadei lo tiboiloch, devadei amrinan hoyil. Certainly we will say hoyil, like the suggestion before. We will say hoyil, that the svara of it does not yet have the shame of chala. But over here we're talking about where it's not the meiser sheni itself, it's the meiser sheni that was nifte onto a matbeya, brought to Yerushalayim, and where that money was used to buy food. You took that money of Meiser Sheni money, you then bought grain with it, and you made challah. Then that challah, that became nitma. So then, aliba de rabbanon lo tiboilach. According to the Chachamim, it's not a question because you can be poide a second time. And then take that challah, poide onto new money, and then eat anywhere, whereby it fulfills the requirement b'chol moshvoisechem in regards to matzah. Kiven da amre yipode, hainu meiser, is just like meiser, no problem. So according to the Chachamim, that's not going to be a question. It'll be valid. The question will be according to Rabbi Yehuda is that you cannot poide a second time. Once you already poide the meiser sheni, you brought the money into Yerushalayim and you bought food with it. If that food became talmei, you can't poide it a second time. Disnan. It says in the Mishnah, halakuach bekesef ma'aser sheni, one who buys with kesef ma'aser sheni money, shenitma, and that food becomes tamei, yipodeh. The Tanna Kama says you can be poideh a second time. Rabbi Yehuda omer yikover. However, Rabbi Yehuda argues and says, no, you can't be poideh, and therefore you have to bury that food. So mi amina, the question Reish Lakish is asking, mi amina, do we say hoyel v'iloi lakuach have? Since if he did not then buy the ma'aser sheni with the kesef, in other words, it wasn't something that he bought with. It was rather like the ma'aser sheni itself that would brought to Yerushalayim. V'hoyel lo kara aleh shem, and since also we'll say a second hoyel that did not get the shame of challah. V'itame yesh lo heter b'moshavos v'nafik bei, and therefore if it became tamei, it will have the heter of all other ma'aser sheni. They can go ahead and use it by being poideh and eating it anywhere else in all moshavos. Hashtanami nafik bei, and therefore you can fulfill your mitzvah with this challah ma'aser sheni that was considered to be lukuach bekesef ma'aser sheni, and fulfill your mitzvah of matzah. That's one side of the question. Oy dilma chad hoyel amrinan trei hoyel lo yamin, or perhaps we say the svar of hoyel since when it comes to only one, but two svaras of hoyel is too far removed, and that we would not say. That's the question that we're going to suggest. The way we're explaining Reish Lakish is the second version. Omar Rava answers either the first version or the second version. He says, Mistabra Shem Meiser Chadhu. He answered by saying it's Mistabra that the name, the Shem of Meiser, is only one, and therefore it would, yes, be valid to be used for your matzah. Even in the scenario, as we just explained, that there's two hoyels to say. That there's the hoyel on the one end to say if it was not being nifte as kesef lakuach, and it doesn't have the shame of challah. In both scenarios, we're saying that it has a din of ma'aser sheni, and Rav Paskins that indeed you can use it for your mitzvah of matzah.